Anderson, Indiana, January 29, 2025, 3:00 a.m. The call comes into dispatch, a man's voice, breathless but strangely measured. "She broke into my house. She's got a gun. She's looking for me inside." Police units tear through the empty streets, emergency lights slicing through the darkness. They pull up to a house where the porch light burns bright, illuminating what's about to become Anderson's most controversial case of the year. Inside that house, an 18-year-old mother named Shamiya Nair Allen is about to make headlines. But not for the reasons you'd expect. See, Shamiya wasn't some random intruder. She was the mother of the homeowner's child. The homeowner? Brian Jackson, a 34-year-old tattoo artist who'd been in her life since she was just 16 years old. Do the math on that timeline and your stomach starts to turn. Drop a comment if you think 31-year-olds pursuing 16-year-olds is predatory behavior. I want to see where you stand on this. But here's where it gets twisted. As officers approach the house, they can hear movement inside. Shamiya's voice, desperate and raw. Brian's voice claiming he's the victim. And then, silence. One gunshot. When the smoke clears, Shamiya Nair Allen is found with a fatal head wound. Brian Jackson is standing there, unharmed, ready with his story about the break-in. Case closed, right? Wrong. Because within hours, Brian's doing something that'll make your blood boil. He's not grieving. He's not calling family. He's not even calling an ambulance for the mother of his child. He's posting on Facebook, and what he posts will expose him as either the most tone-deaf man in Indiana or something much darker. The internet detectives are already connecting dots that don't add up. The timeline doesn't make sense. The story keeps changing. Tonight, we're tearing apart every lie, every manipulation, every red flag that led to this moment. Because Shamiya's story isn't just about one tragic night. It's about 2 years of psychological warfare that started when she was still a teenager. This is the story of how a Valentine's Day baby became a cautionary tale about power, manipulation, and the deadly consequences of toxic relationships. Welcome to our channel. I'm about to show you how a 34-year-old man convinced the world that an 18-year-old mother was the dangerous one. February 14, 2006. Valentine's Day. Shamiya Nair Allen enters this world in the most badass way possible. Her mother, Danielle Pearson, swears the baby came out grabbing for the scissors, trying to cut her own umbilical cord. "My baby has always been strong and a fighter," Danielle would later write. That fighting spirit would define Shamiya's entire life. Growing up in Anderson, Indiana, Shamiya was surrounded by love. Her blended family was massive. Sisters Mikhail, Ashila, India, Asia, and Autumn, brothers Chris, Bryce, and Arnez. Extended family everywhere. This girl had a village, people, who cared about her future. By 18, Shamiya was grinding harder than most adults. Mornings at Olive Garden, slinging plates and dealing with difficult customers. Evenings at DSA, perfecting her craft as a tattoo artist. This wasn't some hobby. She had real artistic talent and the business sense to monetize it. 2 jobs, building a career, supporting herself and her 1-year-old son, Future. But here's where the story takes a dark turn that'll make you want to throw something at your screen. At 16 years old, still a junior in high school, still figuring out who she was, Shamiya crossed paths with Brian Jackson. He was 31. Let that sink in for a second. While she was worried about prom and graduation, he was a grown man with a fully developed brain, life experience, and the kind of confidence that comes with being an adult. Indiana's age of consent laws made their relationship technically legal. But legal doesn't mean right. Legal doesn't mean healthy. And legal sure as hell doesn't mean a 31-year-old pursuing a 16-year-old isn't predatory behavior. Comment if you think there should be consequences for adults who target teenagers, regardless of what the law says. By 17, Shamiya was pregnant. Think about that timeline. She was still in high school when she got pregnant by a man who was 33 years old. While her classmates were planning college visits, she was planning a nursery. Her family watched this unfold with growing horror. Here was their bright, talented, hard-working daughter getting pulled into something that felt wrong from day one. They tried to intervene, tried to show her the red flags, tried to keep her away from Brian. But Shamiya was in love. Or what she thought was love. What she didn't realize was that she'd become the target of a master manipulator who specialized in young women who didn't yet know their worth. The girl who came into this world fighting was about to enter the fight of her life, and Brian Jackson had a 15-year head start on learning how to win battles through psychological warfare. Shamiya thought she was choosing her partner. She had no idea she was walking into a carefully constructed trap that would consume the next 2 years of her life and ultimately destroy everything she was trying to build. The Valentine's Day baby was about to learn that some kinds of love can kill you. Welcome to Brian Jackson's twisted version of the American dream, where one man gets multiple girlfriends, multiple kids, and zero accountability for the chaos he creates. Brian didn't just want a relationship with Shamiya. He wanted her to join his polyamorous lifestyle, which is a fancy way of saying he wanted to sleep around while she stayed loyal. But here's the kicker. Shamiya never signed up for this arrangement. She wanted what most 17-year-olds want, to be someone's one and only. Brian had other plans. Multiple women were rotating through his life, each one dealing with the emotional exhaustion of sharing a man who treated relationships like a hobby collection. And Shamiya? She was expected to smile, play nice, and pretend she was okay with watching her baby's father prioritize other women. The mental gymnastics were insane. Brian would tell Shamiya she was special, that she was different from the others, while simultaneously making it clear she'd never be enough on her own. Classic manipulation. Make someone feel chosen while ensuring they never feel secure. But Shamiya wasn't built for this game. Remember, this is the girl who came out of the womb fighting. She wanted Brian to herself, and she wasn't shy about making that known. The problem? Brian thrived on the drama, the jealousy, the competition between his girlfriends, the constant emotional chaos. This was entertainment for him. The other women in Brian's rotation weren't exactly welcoming Shamiya with open arms either. Picture this, multiple women all competing for scraps of attention from a man who's playing them against each other. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And then there were the kids. Brian had children with multiple partners, creating a web of baby mama drama that would make reality TV producers weep with joy. Shamiya was trying to navigate being a young mother while dealing with the emotional warfare of Brian's other relationships. Here's where it gets really twisted. Brian and Shamiya actually tried to play house for social media. They created fitness content together, posting workout videos and family moments like they were living some perfect life. But even during those supposedly happy moments, the cracks were showing. People who watched their content noticed something was off. Fights would break out mid-workout. Shamiya would storm off camera in frustration. The tension was so thick you could feel it through the screen. They were trying to sell a fantasy while living in a nightmare. Brian would post about being a devoted father and partner, while behind the scenes he was juggling multiple relationships and creating an environment so toxic that even their workout sessions turned into battlegrounds. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. For Shamiya, this wasn't just emotionally exhausting. It was psychologically destructive. She was 18 years old, trying to figure out motherhood, working 2 jobs, and competing for attention from a man who had designed the game so she could never win. Every time she tried to establish boundaries or ask for exclusivity, Brian would remind her that this was his lifestyle, take it or leave it. But leaving wasn't really an option, was it? They had a child together. She was financially dependent. Her family was already judging her choices. Brian had created the perfect trap, a situation where Shamiya felt like she had to stay and fight for a relationship that was designed to make her miserable. He got to play the field while she got to play the fool. The worst part? Brian genuinely seemed to believe he was the good guy in this scenario. In his mind, he was offering these women the gift of his presence. The fact that it was destroying them psychologically wasn't his problem. It was theirs for not being mature enough to handle his lifestyle. This wasn't love. This was systematic emotional abuse disguised as modern relationship dynamics. April 2024. The mask finally slips. Brian Jackson gets arrested for domestic battery against Shamiya. Let that sink in. The man who's been playing victim on social media, the guy who claims he's just trying to help this young troubled girl, just got hauled away in handcuffs for putting his hands on her. But Brian's legal troubles were just getting started. July 2024 rolls around and he's back behind bars. This time it's a triple threat: violating home detention, lying about his identity to police, and fraud charges. The man who's been lecturing everyone about responsibility and maturity can't even follow basic court orders. Here's what's really sick. While he's sitting in jail, Brian takes to social media to whine about his situation. November 2024. He's posting about how much he hates being on house arrest, complaining about his earthly troubles like he's some kind of philosophical victim instead of a repeat offender who can't stop breaking the law. Meanwhile, Shamiya's world is crumbling. The stress of Brian's arrests, the ongoing drama with his other girlfriends trying to raise their son's future, it's all building to a breaking point. December 11th, 2024. Shamiya reaches her limit. She walks into what she thought was their shared home and finds Brian in bed with another woman. Not just any bed, their bed. The bed where she'd slept, where she'd nursed their baby, where she'd tried to build something real with this man who kept treating her like she was disposable. The rage that followed was inevitable. Shamiya physically confronted Brian and the police got called. She ended up arrested for criminal mischief and domestic battery. The charges might seem minor, property damage under $750, but they tell a story of a young woman who'd been pushed past her breaking point. Think about the psychology here. Shamiya had been told for 2 years that she needed to accept Brian's other relationships, that she was being immature and possessive for wanting exclusivity. But finding him with another woman in their bed? That was the moment reality crashed into the fantasy Brian had been selling her. But here's the most disturbing part. Even after all this chaos, they tried to keep up appearances. 2 weeks after Shamiya's arrest, they're posting happy birthday content for their son's future, smiling for the camera like nothing happened. The forced smiles, the fake family moments, the pretense that everything was fine. It was all performance art. Behind those birthday photos was a relationship so toxic that Child Protective Services had already stepped in and removed their son from the home. That's right. While they're posting happy family content, their child is living with relatives because DCS determined the environment was unsafe. The state of Indiana looked at Brian and Shamiya's situation and said, "This child cannot stay here." By January 2025, the pressure cooker was ready to explode. Multiple arrests, domestic violence charges, a child in protective custody, and 2 people who'd been at war for months while pretending everything was perfect. Something had to give, and on January 29th, it finally did. January 29th, 2025. The day everything exploded. Shamiya shows up at Brian's house, but this isn't some casual visit. She's done playing games, done pretending she's okay with his polyamorous circus, done being treated like she's disposable. Reports say she had one mission: find Brian and the woman he was with. But Brian isn't answering the door, so Shamiya does what desperate people do. She finds another way in, through a window, into what she still considers her home, the place where she'd tried to build a life with this man who kept destroying everything she touched. The neighbors hear shouting, furniture moving, the sound of someone searching through rooms, calling out names. This isn't a quiet confrontation. This is 2 years of rage and heartbreak exploding all at once. Someone calls 911. The dispatcher hears a frantic male voice. "She broke into my house. She's got a gun. She's looking for me." Brian Jackson, the same man who's been arrested multiple times, is now painting himself as the victim of a home invasion. Police units race through Anderson streets, multiple officers, lights flashing, treating this like an active shooter situation. They arrive to find Brian outside, playing the role of terrified homeowner, while Shamiya is still inside the house. Here's where the timeline gets crucial. Officers begin clearing the residence, following protocol for an armed intruder situation. They're moving room by room, trying to locate Shamiya and de-escalate whatever's happening inside. Then it happens. One gunshot, single shot, echoing through the house. The officers freeze. Radio chatter explodes. They rush toward the sound, not knowing if they're about to find a victim, a suspect, or something worse. What they find is Shamiya Allen, 18 years old, with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. She's alone in the room. The weapon is there. Brian is outside, unharmed, ready with his story about the dangerous ex-girlfriend who broke into his house. But here's what makes your blood boil. Brian's first instinct isn't to call family. It isn't to grieve. It isn't to think about their son Future, who just lost his mother. His first instinct is damage control. Within hours of Shamiya's death, Brian Jackson is on Facebook, not posting some heartfelt tribute to the mother of his child, not expressing shock or sadness or even basic human decency. He posts, "To whoever gave my BM a gun, she just broke in my house and in the head." Read that again. The woman he claimed to love, the mother of his child, just died tragically, and he's on social media using angry face emojis and calling her his baby mama, like she's some random person who inconvenienced him. The internet exploded. Comments poured in calling him heartless, suspicious, guilty. The backlash was so intense that Brian deleted the post. But screenshots live forever. But deleting that post was just the beginning of Brian's PR nightmare, because what happened next would expose him as either the most tone-deaf man in America or something much more calculated and disturbing. The same man who couldn't show basic respect for Shamiya in death was about to do something that would make everyone question everything they thought they knew about January 29th. Because apparently Shamiya had one final message for the world, a long, detailed explanation of why she did what she did, posted on her Facebook account after she was already gone. The only problem? It didn't sound like Shamiya at all. It sounded exactly like Brian Jackson trying to save his own skin. Hours after Shamiya's death, something bizarre appears on her Facebook account. A massive wall of text, supposedly written by her before she died, explaining everything. But as people start reading, alarm bells go off everywhere. This isn't Shamiya's voice. This is Brian Jackson's damage control operation in full swing. The post starts with Shamiya supposedly taking accountability for ruining Brian's life. She allegedly writes about how she manipulated him, how she was wrong for trying to change his polyamorous lifestyle, how everything bad that happened was actually her fault. But here's where it gets sick. The post reads like a love letter to Brian Jackson written by Brian Jackson. "He was just right for me," the fake Shamiya writes. "I could write a book about the things that prove he loves me and that he's a great man." The internet wasn't buying it. People who knew Shamiya started commenting, "This doesn't sound like her. She would never write like this. Someone else posted this." Let's break down the evidence that Brian wrote this himself. First, the writing style. Both Brian's defensive rants and this final letter use identical speech patterns. Same run-on sentences, same dramatic flair, same victim mentality wrapped in fake accountability. Second, the themes. Both posts hit the exact same talking points. "Nobody understands me. I was just trying to help. Everyone's judging me unfairly." It's the same narcissistic playbook, just dressed up as Shamiya's words. Third, the slang and abbreviations. Both posts use y'all constantly. SMH, shake my head, LOL, in inappropriate contexts. The linguistic fingerprints are identical, but the most damning evidence? The post defends Brian's character using information only Brian would know or care about. It mentions his financial losses, his house, his car, his job, all framed as things Shamiya supposedly felt guilty about destroying. Comment fake letter if you think Brian wrote Shamiya's supposed final message. Let's see how many of you caught this manipulation. The fake letter goes on for paragraphs, painting Brian as this misunderstood victim who lost everything because of Shamiya's jealousy. It even includes a bizarre section about how Child Protective Services was wrong to take their son, and how Shamiya's own family abandoned her. But here's the most twisted part. The letter tries to absolve Brian of any responsibility while simultaneously making Shamiya look unstable and dangerous. It's character assassination disguised as a confession. People started calling Brian out directly. Someone messaged him, "Did you write Shamiya's final post?" His response was telling. Instead of a simple, "No, I didn't write it," he went into this defensive rant about death threats and people showing up at his house. Classic deflection. When caught in a lie, change the subject and play victim. The public backlash intensified. People were sharing side-by-side comparisons of Brian's writing and the fake letter. The similarities were undeniable. Same tone, same vocabulary, same self-serving narrative. Brian's response? Delete everything and claim he was being harassed. But the internet never forgets, and screenshots were already circulating everywhere. Think about the psychology here. Shamiya is dead, and Brian's immediate concern isn't grief or justice or even basic human decency. His concern is controlling the narrative, making sure everyone knows this wasn't his fault. So he creates this elaborate fiction where Shamiya takes all the blame, praises his character, and essentially writes his defense for him. It's manipulation on a level that's hard to comprehend. The fake letter even includes details about their relationship that only someone trying to justify their behavior would include. References to Brian's polyamorous lifestyle, explanations for why the age gap was actually fine, justifications for every red flag people had been pointing out. But the internet wasn't having it. Comments poured in calling out the obvious deception. People demanded to know why Brian thought he could get away with such a transparent lie. The answer? Because he'd been getting away with manipulating Shamiya for 2 years. He thought he could manipulate public opinion the same way. He was wrong. The fake letter scandal didn't just expose Brian as a liar. It exposed him as someone so narcissistic, so desperate to avoid accountability that he would literally put words in a dead woman's mouth to save his own reputation. Shamiya couldn't defend herself anymore, but the internet could see right through Brian's pathetic attempt to rewrite history. The man who claimed to love her had just committed the ultimate betrayal, stealing her voice even in death. While Shamiya's family plans her funeral, Brian Jackson launches into full victim mode. His social media becomes a masterclass in narcissistic damage control. He posts these unhinged rants about how he's the one suffering, how people are threatening him, how nobody understands what he's been through. The man whose girlfriend just died is making it all about himself. But here's the part that'll make you want to throw your phone. Brian becomes the very first donor to Shamiya's GoFundMe. He drops a whole $100 like that's supposed to erase 2 years of psychological torture. The audacity is breathtaking. The same man who just faked her final letter is now playing grieving boyfriend, making a public donation so everyone can see what a good guy he is. Meanwhile, people are showing up at his house. Windows getting smashed at 5 a.m. Black SUVs rolling up in broad daylight. The internet detectives have his address, and they're not playing games. Brian's response? More victim posts. I can't even grieve because people are trying to hurt me. I'm losing my mind. What would y'all do? But the most heartbreaking voice in all this chaos belongs to Shamiya's mother, Danielle Pearson. Her GoFundMe post cuts through Brian's noise like a knife. My daughter was manipulated by a 32-year-old man. He drove her to a different level of insanity. This man went as far as to create a post on her behalf after she had already passed. Danielle sees right through Brian's performance. She knows her daughter didn't write that letter. She knows Brian's playing victim while her family grieves a real loss. The contrast is stark. A mother's genuine pain versus a manipulator's theatrical performance. One person mourning a daughter, another person mourning his damaged reputation. Shamiya left behind her 1-year-old son future and an unborn child. Brian left behind a trail of lies and a social media meltdown that exposed exactly who he really was. This case exposes something rotten in how we handle predatory relationships. Brian Jackson didn't break any laws when he started pursuing 16-year-old Shamiya, but legality doesn't equal morality. The power imbalance was staggering. A 31-year-old man with life experience targeting a teenager still figuring out who she was. By the time she realized she was trapped, she had a baby, financial dependence, and years of psychological conditioning telling her this was normal. Social media became both weapon and evidence. Brian used it to control narratives, fake letters, and play victim, but it also preserved his lies for the world to analyze. Young mothers like Shamiya face impossible choices: stay in toxic relationships or risk losing everything. Society failed her by normalizing age gaps that create these power imbalances. The hashtag Justice for Nair Allen isn't just about one case. It's about recognizing that legal doesn't mean safe, and that we need better protection for vulnerable young women caught in these predatory dynamics. The official story? Shamiya broke in. Police arrived, single gunshot, case closed. But the inconsistencies are glaring. Why did Brian immediately post angry emojis instead of calling for help? Why fake an entire letter in her voice? Why become the first GoFundMe donor if he's truly innocent? The timeline doesn't add up. The behavior doesn't match grief. The desperation to control the narrative screams guilt. Shamiya's final moments remain a mystery, but Brian's actions afterward tell their own story. An innocent man doesn't need to steal a dead woman's voice to defend himself. Subscribe for updates as this case develops, because justice for Shamiya is far from over.